Welcome to If Numbers Could Talk. My name is Keilyn. If Numbers Could Talk is a part of the Thinkering group. You can find us over at thinkering.space. You can also find at Thinkering Space the Thinkering Talks podcast, the Exofathom podcast, along with the Plank Talks with Joe. When you get a chance, please check out our merchandise. We have merchandise on our website, thinkering.space, as well as merchandise at teespring.com/thinkering-shop. Please visit, grab a t-shirt, grab a mug. We'll appreciate it. And when you do, feel free to let us know that you've decided to become a member of any of our fan clubs. Today, we'll be talking about two guys who pretty much did what it took every single night to own their careers. Now, today will be one of those days where we take the time to break down some numbers of guys who just showed up every night. It's not going to be a superstar battle or anything like that. In fact, these guys were two total opposite ends of what you consider a player. And even more so than being on opposite ends of what you consider a player, these guys had different roles. They never had the exact same position or the same level of responsibilities, right? I want to also start this episode, before I even tell you who we're breaking down, by mentioning where I get my stats from sometimes, especially for this episode. Stathead.com is definitely one of the sites that I use. And I believe the other, which I believe is a part of stathead.com, is basketballreference.com, along with, of course, NBA.com to cross-reference and those things, right? So to get to the guys that we're breaking down today we'll be breaking down Gilbert Arenas and Derek Fisher. Again, two guys that never had the same role, total opposite ends of responsibility, total opposite ends of stardom when it comes to the NBA. One was drafted, well, they both were drafted, later in the game, but one was drafted with the expectations of not really making it, and the other was drafted with the expectations of doing exactly what he did, which is being a consummate professional. Now, the consummate professional would be Derek Fisher. That is what he is known as, D-Fish. You know him as an Iron Man. He's a guy who played 82 games in multiple seasons. He's a guy who didn't miss a night, a guy who played his heart out every night. Even if the numbers didn't quite make it look that way, by the end of his career, well, let's see what the numbers say, right? And our other guy is Gilbert Arenas. Again, two opposite ends of the spectrum. Arenas and Fisher are not in the same vein. If you're comparing players simply based on what you know off the top of your head about them, you're not going to put Gilbert Arenas and Derek Fisher in your mouth in the same sentence unless you're simply saying they're both point guards. And if you're even describing that, Gilbert was more of a scoring guard, a combo guard, they call him nowadays. And Fish was a point guard. That's it. He was a point guard. He wasn't the guy that you needed to drop 30 a night or anything of that nature. Now, these gentlemen played against each other a total of 16 games. Derek Fisher won that match, if you want to look at it that way. Who won the match off? Derek Fisher won the match off of their 16 games, 9 games to 7. 9 games to 7. Now, again, they did not have the same responsibilities. So for the majority of Gilbert's career, once he really got going around his 4th year in the league, I believe, something around there, he really started making a headway. He went from being the guy that you were wondering if he was even going to be on the practice team, from the way it comes off. And of course, when you listen to him tell the story, there's some reasons he admits he was a bit of a goofy. But once he started getting traction, it was a full out sprint. It was a full out sprint from the moment he was noticed, the moment he started making waves, right? And Derek Fisher, again, he was never the number one option. I can't even remember if he was ever the number two option. I think there was a few times he was the number three option, but I don't think he was ever even the number two option for the Lakers specifically, which is where he spent the majority of his career. So let's even discuss that, right? Before we talk about averages and percentages and all of that good stuff. We have Gilbert Arenas, who played on 4 teams, and he played for 11 seasons. He was drafted in 2002, and he was retired in 2012, or technically retired in 2012. Where Derek Fisher was drafted in 1997 and ended his career in 2014. Gilbert Arenas played for the Orlando Magic, the Washington Wizards, the Golden State Warriors, who drafted him, and the Memphis Grizzlies. Derek Fisher played for the Lakers, who drafted him, the Golden State Warriors, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Dallas Maverick, and the Utah Jazz. Now, again, it's a little different. Both of these guys spent a majority of their career with one ball club, but Gilbert started moving around, I'd say a little earlier, well, obviously a little earlier in his career than Fish did. Derek Fisher didn't really move until, if I remember correctly, maybe about 13 years in, 12 years in is when he started getting moved around, right? He was with the Lakers through all 5 of Kobe rings, and we're going to discuss that all. Now, 11 seasons versus 18 seasons is our comparison, and one guy made 163 million, another guy made 63 million, and I am not one to count anyone's pockets. I don't think either of these guys did anything wrong, but the guy that played 11 seasons made the most. So while no one did anything wrong, again, when you have different roles, those roles have a pay grade. At certain points, Gilbert was considered the star on his team, so he was compensated as the star. Derek Fisher, for the most part, again, for all of the major runs in his career, the rings, those were all with Kobe. So, and Shaq and Pau Gasol, but being that all 5 of them were with Kobe Bryant, I have to say it again, he was never the number one option. Now, let's get to the head-to-head average in these 16 games before we get to career. And, again, we already know Derek Fisher has 5 rings. Gilbert did not get the chance to win any rings. Gilbert Arenas averaged in the 16 games versus the Derek Fisher Lakers, which is what we'll call them for this episode, or the Derek Fisher teams, because Derek was moving around the time Gilbert was out of the league. So in their head-to-head comparison, Gilbert averaged 22 points, 3.8 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.5 steals, 0.3 blocks, 3.6 turnovers, and 3.2 fouls. Now that is as the star, as the leading player on the team he was on. Derek Fisher averaged versus Gilbert Arenas and the Gilbert Arenas led teams 9.9 points, 1.8 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1.1 steals, no blocks, with 2.3 fouls. 2.3 turnovers. I did not annotate how many fouls Derek Fisher averaged in that point of time, which I apologize for. However, the head-to-head numbers show me that you had a guy that did his job, and you had a guy who, he put on a show, right? And if you ever watch Gilbert Arenas play, that's what you got. Once he started gaining that traction I was speaking of a moment ago, you got a show. They didn't call the guy Agent Zero Hibachi. What are some other things I remember him being called? The General, they didn't call him those kind of things just because. And My favorite personally was Agent Zero. Like, he's Agent Zero. His number zero. Zero to Hero was another one. When guys made an impact, they got dubbed by the media or by the fans in different ways. Derek Fisher was dubbed D-Fish. That's it, just D-Fish, which was consistent and consummate, just like his gameplay, just like his career. Now, for a career, compared to what they did versus each other, I'd say they were both pretty on track with what they did career-wise. For a career, Gilbert Arenas averaged 20.7 points, 3.9 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 1.6 steals, 0.2 blocks, 3.2 turnovers, and 3 flat fouls. Where that to me is pretty on point with his 16 game average, versus the Derek Fisher teams, right? A career for Derek Fisher, career averages 8.3 points, 2.1 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.1 blocks, 1.1 turnovers, with 2.1 fouls. Again, looking at the Derek Fisher numbers in the games versus the Gilbert Arenas led teams or the Gilbert Arenas teams, and looking at his career numbers, he played consistent. I mean, the numbers don't look that impressive, right? Because, I mean, you tell somebody I averaged 8 points for a career, they think, oh, this guy, anybody could have done that. I wouldn't quite agree. If you ever saw Derek Fisher play, you knew when he wasn't on the floor. Even though it wasn't, again, the numbers and even his style of play wasn't flashy. He didn't jump off the screen. Even watching Laker games in person, which is when I got to see him in person, sometimes he was extremely strong. You saw that, right? But even the numbers show you that he literally just showed up every night and did what was asked of him. I believe Derek Fisher could have done much more than what he did through his career. We could have seen some more incredible things possibly. However, and I believe he showed that once he was moved off of the Lakers and sent to like OKC and stuff, and people thought like, oh, this guy can't do it anymore. Right. Yeah, it's interesting that even the numbers show that he was simply consistent. He just showed up. Now, Gilbert Arenas played for his career 552 NBA games. In 11 seasons, Gilbert Arenas played 552 NBA games. In 18 seasons, Derek Fisher played 1,287 NBA games for Derek Fisher. Now, again, and I alluded to this earlier, Derek Fisher was a bit of an Iron Man. He was not, again, a guy who showed up every night. He did his job. He showed up consistently to do his job. He did what was asked of him. In 9 seasons out of his 18, Derek Fisher played 82 of 82 season games. 9 seasons of Derek Fisher's 18-year career, he played 82 of 82 regular season games. Now, that's even more interesting when you find out he played a few, I think 2 or 3 seasons of 80, I think 1 season of 81, and a bunch of other seasons still were plus 60, plus 70. Now, the back end, I want to say when he was being moved around, he still averaged the last 2 seasons, I want to say 63, 64 games and about 32 games while being moved around and not even being considered a consummate player, a player who could do it anymore. Again, it says a lot. The guy showed up. He gave it his all every single night. He did what was asked of him. He didn't do someone else's job. He did his job. He owned his job. He knew what he was capable of. And probably instead of trying to do what everyone else would do and, be the spectacular, he just did it. He just said, hey, that's what you need from me? Okay, Here you go. Pass. I'm in the corner. I shoot the shot. I'm going to defend over here. I'm going to do what is asked of me. A consummate professional. Now, as we move from the amount of games they played, and we've already covered their career averages, let's talk about their career percentages. Their career percentages. Gilbert Arenas, for a career, shot 42% from the field, 35% from the three-point line, and 80% from the free throw line. Basically, muscle memory, right? Derek Fisher for a career. Now, remember, that was where Gilbert Arenas' percentages, 42% from the field, 35 from the three, 80 from the free throw, over 552 season games. Derek Fisher, over 1,287 regular season games, averaged 40% from the field, 37% from the three-point line, and 82% from the free throw line over 1,287 games. Again, two guys who showed up every night and they just gave what was asked of them. They gave what they had. They did their job. They did what they came to do. Their job wasn't to eat chicken fingers or to watch the guy in the third row and see what he's ordering off the menu. Their job was to play ball, and they did that. Both of them. 42%, 40%, 35%, 37%, 80%, 82%. These guys showed up and they took smart shots. And if they didn't take smart shots, by gosh, if these were bad shot percentages, sorry, I felt the emotion coming up. Did you hear it? I heard it. I'm sorry. I apologize. Back to these numbers. Now, over 552 games, averaging 20 points, Gilbert Arenas played a total of 19,351 minutes. 19,351 minutes for Gilbert Arenas. Over 1,287 games, averaging 8.3 points. Derek Fisher played 32,719 NBA minutes. 32,719 NBA minutes, averaging 8.3 points over the 1,287 games. 32,000 minutes. 32,719 minutes. I shortchanged him just a little bit there, and I apologize. That's a lot. That's, I don't know, 18 years worth of work. That's a lot of work. It's good work, hard work, right? Now, this is where the numbers start to meld a little bit. Now, everything I've said to this point, one guy is either astronomically ahead of the other, or the other is, on either end, right? One way or another, one guy is that much ahead of the other guy for most of the things that I've said so far, except for percentages. They're pretty even in percentages, which is kind of my point here. That's really where we're getting at. 552 season games versus 1,287 season games. Like, that's more than twice the amount. Okay. Now, how many shots did they make? See, like I said, this episode, we're getting back to comparing, honestly comparing. So Gilbert Arenas made in his career in 11 seasons, Gilbert Arenas made 3,722 shots. 3,722 made shots for Gilbert Arenas. For Derek Fisher, 3,720 made shots in 18 years. 18 years, 3,720 shots. 11 years, 3,722 shots. Again, these guys had two totally different roles. Here is where I found really interesting. Derek Fisher, although he made two less shots in his career than Gilbert Arenas did, shot 500 more shots than Gilbert Arenas did. 500 more shots over the extra 7 years in his career than Gilbert had, right? I'd say this is where we start to understand what they mean when they say a consummate professional. He didn't come trying to do someone else's job. He had 500 more attempts than the star for most of the teams that named Gilbert Arenas, who was the star on most of the teams he played on. He was the #1 option on the majority of the teams he was on. And he only made 2 more shots than the most, from what I can remember at the very moment, probably the most consistent role player and most necessary role player in a long time. It's not a lot of guys that were as necessary as Derek Fisher were. There is some discussion that has been had. Would Kobe have had it as easy without Fish? You know, very similar to the Jordan Pippen discussion. We don't know. We don't know. They had him. Kobe had Fish. Jordan had Pip. It's in the books already. Story's written. Let's dissect it. Look at the numbers. Tell us what their careers have told us through the numbers. Did they own it, or did the careers own them? These 2 gentlemen that I'm covering today, oh, they owned their careers. They owned their careers. This is the career you own. 552 games compared to 1,287 games. This is the career you owned. Now, total points. Total points. Now, again, with this comparison, I've decided to add today the point differential in the total stats that I'm about to rattle. I didn't do that for playoffs, and there is a reason. But for season stats, I did. Let's take a look. Gilbert Arenas had a total of 11,402 points, which is 689 points more than Derek Fisher's 10,713 points. Gilbert Arenas had 2,168 rebounds for his career, which is 490 less than Derek Fisher's 2,658 rebounds. I didn't realize Fish was such a rebounder. I mean, granted, we're comparing him to another guard, but Gilbert was noted to be a rebounder, like a guy who would crash offensive boards and things of that nature, defensive boards, mostly because he wanted possessions. But this is something he was able to do while still remaining the player he needed to be for his team. We see that with guys like Russell today, just on the boards, right? Now, I don't think Gilbert crashes the boards like a Russell, but I'm saying the position, the ability at that position to see, identify, crash, and retrieve. For assists, Gilbert Arenas had 2,909 assists, which is still 895 assists less than Derek Fisher, who had 3,804 assists for his career. Derek Fisher also had 1,352 steals. That is 468 more steals than Gilbert Arenas, who had 884 steals on his career. Now, while Fish took the steal category, Gilbert took the block category. Gilbert Arenas had 134 blocks in his career, which was 36 more blocks than Derek Fisher was able to amass with his 98 blocks. Now, turnover-wise, these are both point guards. One was a star. The other was just the starting guard. He was the distributor, the main distributor for his squad most of the time. He was that guy. Ironically, I think a lot of shots didn't turn into assists for Fish because the #1 guy, the guy who he usually was trying to get the ball to, was a shot creator. So he might get him in a really good position, but the chances of him catching and going up with it weren't high. He was typically going to catch it, probably put it on the ground, make a move, and then put his take his attempt. With that being the case, you don't see how much of a distributor Derek was. He was the main distributor for his ball club. So with that, you're gonna have quite a bit of turnovers. When you're the guy passing the ball's coming out of your hand, going to someone else on often. You're the one reading the floor. You are gonna end up throwing the ball away a few times per game. In fact, all turnovers aren't just gonna be to someone. Sometimes the ball goes out, right? So Gilbert Arenas had 1,744 turnovers for his career, which is 271 more turnovers than Derek Fisher had with 1,473 turnovers. Now, these turnover numbers, I don't see them as astronomical for either guy because they were both the primary distributor. Where Gilbert was also the primary scorer, if he did not have the score, it was usually his job to find the other guy. Again, as I said, these guys did not have the same roles. These guys did not have the same level of responsibility. However, the numbers that come from their careers, and I will say again, it paints a really nice story for how to own a career, in my opinion. How to take advantage of every single minute that they give you, whether it's 19,351 minutes or whether it's 32,719 minutes. How do you utilize them appropriately to own what is called your career, what is going to go down in books under your name? These guys, they did that proper. Now, personal fouls, keep in mind, this is just a part of the game. This isn't necessarily something that says that these guys couldn't defend or anything of that nature. Simply, how did the ref feel about the contact and the play? So you have a guy like Derek Fisher. A lot of times he ended up having to guard your Allen Iversons, your Chauncey Billups, your Gilbert Arenas, just a lot of different guys that were really good at creating contact. And while Gilbert had to guard those guys as well, he was usually making them really tired on the other end. So he was probably drawing more fouls on the offensive end than committing fouls on the opposite end. But he committed plenty of fouls. But Gilbert was also, in my opinion, known to jump gaps, shoot through the lane. So when you're jumping a gap, fouls won't be as much of the stat. I'm thinking if there was a stat for deflections, if there was a stat for how many times did you jump the lane and miss, Gilbert would probably be on that, high up on that. But again, some guys, that is their style of defense, and it works. Again, 884 steals in 11 years is nothing to bat an eye at. So let's keep in mind this guy, these gentlemen, they weren't just throwing the ball away and hitting guys and playing wild. They played controlled games that got great results, got the desired results. So as far as personal fouls for a career, Derek Fisher has 2,684 personal fouls, which is 1,046 more personal fouls than Gilbert Arenas, who had 1,638 personal fouls through his career. Now, what can you say? Those are the numbers. If you saw him play, you might be like, "Hey, wait, they might have missed a few, right?" But no, it's right here, it's right here in front of you. Don't believe me? Google it. Do your job. Do some research if you choose. It's all fine. And for the most part, what I love about the personal foul category is we don't discuss that there are often, it's discussed, it's known. We don't discuss that there are guys who have more personal fouls than points probably throughout their career because that was their job. They during a certain era, that was their job. They were the enforcer. That was it. There's nothing to add. They were the enforcer. You come down the lane, 80% of the time, you're getting planted. 60% of the time, 80% of the time, you're getting planted. 90% of the time, you're getting hit. 10% of the time you might get through unscathed, and that's what they call an elusive move, right? So when you look at all of the totals of these gentlemen, the totals aren't that far off for 11 seasons versus 18 seasons. This is pretty nice. It tells me that both of these guys, and I'll say it again, they showed up every night. They did their job. And not only did they do their job, they understood their jobs. I believe point guards, if no one else, has to know their jobs. The center might think his job is to shoot fadeaways. And if it works, it works. The small forward might think his job is to just run baseline and leap for alley-oops. And if it works, it works. But when your point guard doesn't know that his job, what his job is, whether his job is to distribute that game or whether his job is to score, or to tell the next guy, hey, you have the hot hand. I need you to right here. You're going to hit this. And if a point guard doesn't know that that is his job, team's not going to do much. It's not going to be what you need it to be. If the point guard is not always the team captain, but very often he is the team leader on the court. He is the on-court coach most of the time. Even if he's not the best player, if he is the primary ball handler, that is going to be what he is there for. And these two gentlemen, that's what they did. They round ball in their hand, and they knew how to delegate and how to tell you sometimes, hey, get on my way. Get on my way. I got it. Now, award-wise, aside from the 5 rings that Fish attained with the Lakers, neither of these gentlemen are really award-driven athletes. They don't have this incredible accolade list, MVPs and all of that good just stuff. They don't. But their numbers are there. Their career was great, and I'll give some proof on that. All-Star games. Derek Fisher did not attend was never voted as an All-Star. Gilbert Arenas was voted as an All-Star 3 times. All-NBA selections. Gilbert Arenas has 3 All-NBA selections. Derek Fisher has never been voted to an All-NBA team. Most improved in 2002, 2003, Gilbert Arenas won the Most Improved award. That is when he gained traction. That is when Gilbert Arenas, that is when Agent Zero showed up. That was I think that was right before Hibachi showed up, but it was right when Agent Zero showed up, when guys were kind of like, is that the same guy that you guys weren't playing 2 years ago? Why weren't you guys playing him 2 years ago? Now, that's pretty much it for Fish's accolades. For Gilbert, however, I'll have to continue just a little bit. He had a few other season awards, right? So in 2005, 2006, Gilbert led the league in turnovers. Sounds crazy, but yeah. He also led the league in minutes that same season. So if you play the most minutes, you're probably going to turn the ball over the most amount of times when you are the main facilitator. It's just how it works. However, Gilbert also had the most 3-point attempts and the most 3-point makes the following season of 2006, 2007. So he plays 82 games, pretty much, or excuse me, he plays all of the games he was there for. He got all his minutes in, everything he needed to do. He played the most minutes. And then the next season, played a good, still a high amount of minutes, still had a high level of turnovers, but he also had the most 3-point makes and attempts. Now, again, if you saw these guys play, you would have to ask, was this when Gilbert was kind of just looked seemingly like he was just hoisting shots because he was Gilbert Arenas? It's around Hibachi time, right? Well, no. Let's remember, for a career, Gilbert Arenas shot 35% from the 3-point line. So I don't think he was just hoisting shots. He was shooting his shot. He was shooting the shot that works for him. Numbers to add to 2020 Gilbert Arenas. Recent interview, I heard him and his son say that Gilbert Arenas still shoots and makes 98 out of 103, 101. 35% from the three for a career makes sense to me. Something that isn't discussed enough when it comes to professional athletes is the work they have to put in to become professional athletes. We'll talk about that later. Now, while we're discussing accolades, let's talk about the highest point total for these gentlemen. Derek Fisher's highest point total was 29. I believe it was versus the Spurs. 29 points, 18 years. That's his highest. Again, this is a guy who showed up and did what was asked of him. Kobe's job was to score 50 and 80. And, Derek said, hey, what do I need to do? And in fact, not only did Derek say, hey, what do I need to do? Sometimes I'm sure Derek came in and said, hey, this is what I see needs to be done. And this is how you can get what you need. Gilbert Arenas, on the other hand, dropped a 60 ball on Kobe. Now, dropping 60 versus the Lakers while Derek Fisher was there, in their head-to-head comparison, he still only averaged 22.5. So also keep in mind, when you watched Gilbert and Derek Fisher on the floor, you weren't watching Gilbert and Derek Fisher. You were watching Gilbert and Kobe. It was the Gilbert versus Kobe show. Mamba and Hibachi, right? Or another funny one, Black Mongoose. Google it, figure it out, Now, we only got through the season so far with these two gentlemen. And season-wise, in 11 years, Gilbert did some amazing things. But to know that you can be a guy like Fish, you could be a Derek Fisher. You could show up every day, do your job, not question your job, not want someone else's job, ensure that everyone else is doing their job, and still come out on top. I don't think Derek Fisher ever complained about a contract or about minutes. I don't think he ever needed to, because he showed up and did his job, and his play spoke for himself. Gilbert, I don't think he ever had to, but again, his own admittance, he was a bit of a goofy. It was all fun for him when he just knew he was that good, and he showed he was that good. And that played out differently for some parts of his career. I'm not going to go into the whole what happened at the end of his career. Just know it's not what people think. That he could have come back after the incident, but go follow him. He'll tell you those stories. And Derek Fisher, after his career, he came back as a coach and gave his knowledge to the youth, continued to do that. Now let's get back to them when they were playing though, right? 2020, let's back it on up. We getting back to the years. Between 2002 and 2012. Between 97 and 2014, these are the years we're comparing. 11 seasons versus 18 seasons. Playoffs come around, and that's when the big boys come to play. Playoffs come around, and who cares what you did for 82 games? What you got for the next few? You got 16 in you? Maybe. Okay. You got 28 in you? Maybe. But no matter how many you got in you, what are you going to do with them? How many minutes are you going to get? And what are you going to do with every minute you're given? Are you going to wait for somebody else to seize the moment? I don't know. But with these two guys, let's discuss it. Gilbert Arenas had 5 playoff appearances for a total of 31 games. Derek Fisher had a total of 16 playoff appearances for a total of 259 playoff games. I'll say that again. Derek Fisher had 16 playoff appearances for a total of 259 playoff games. That is more than 50% of Gilbert's total games for his career. And that is not a slight towards Gilbert. I am simply reading the numbers. So that means a little over 259 of Derek Fisher's 1,287 played games. Those are playoffs, right? So he'd be right in the 1,000 range, right at the double mark over Gilbert if it weren't for his playoff games. Now, 31 games compared to 259 games. Let's still look at these averages, and then we're going to look at some totals and some percentages, and we're going to number it up, figure it out, get these figures flowing through our head. So Gilbert Arenas in 31 playoff games averaged 17.1 points, 3.5 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.4 blocks, 2.4 turnovers, and 2.8 fouls through the playoffs for Gilbert Arenas. And Derek Fisher in 259 playoff games averaged, again, a very consonant number. 8.3 points, 2.2 rebounds, 2.3 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.1 blocks, 0.9 turnovers, 0.9 turnovers in 259 playoff games, while averaging 2.5 steals. Let me go back just one stat. 0.9 turnovers for a playoff career from a guy who only averaged 1.1 turnovers. Averaged 3 assists for his career. And when it came to the playoffs, averaged 2.3 assists. Still with 0.9 turnovers. Now, Derek Fisher, when we go back to those season stats, and we're going to go to the playoff stats in a minute, and you'll see, he had a high number of steals. A high number of turnovers. Yeah. But with the amount of games he played, the average amount of turnovers he gave up per game, man, can't say it enough. The guy took care of the ball. Again, if you watched a game that Derek Fisher was in, you knew when he was not in. One of those ways was the ball was turned over just a little bit more. Just a little bit. A little smidgen. Is that what they call them? Smidgens? Small bit. Skosh. So when I think about all the averages, the amount of games for the playoffs, the games are a huge difference. Huge difference in games. You're not talking about 258 games to 202 games. We're talking about 31 games to 258 games. It is a big margin between the games. But we're still going to talk about some totals. We're still going to talk about some percentages. And most importantly, we're going to listen to these numbers. We're not going to tell them what they're telling us. We're going to listen to what they're telling us. So, playoff totals. In 31 playoff games, Gilbert Arenas had a total of 530 points, 107 rebounds, 118 assists, 37 steals, 11 blocks, 74 turnovers, and 88 personal fouls through Gilbert Arenas' playoff career. 31 games. If you ask me, listening to these numbers, the discussion I had, looking at the numbers that are still right in front of me, Gilbert came to the playoffs ready to play. I mean, there's nothing inconsistent about his numbers. And when I get to his percentages, you will understand there was nothing inconsistent. The only inconsistencies was the number of games per year he played, which makes these numbers incredible. The only inconsistency was the fact that he did not, in my opinion, get a full tenured career. Imagine what these will look like past that, past 11 years. Now, Derek Fisher in his 258 playoff games, I'm going to say that again. It's just incredible. 258 playoff games for a guy that was never considered a star, for a guy that you probably didn't even look out for if he wasn't on the team you were rooting for, right? And remember, we're comparing him to a star. In 258 playoff games, Derek Fisher had 2,146 points, 578 rebounds, 598 assists, 272 steals, 16 blocks, 237 turnovers, and he averaged 0.9 turnovers, 237 turnovers in 258 games, averaging 0.9 turnovers. It's incredible, right? And he had 645 personal fouls in the playoffs, 258 games. Hard play. You have to show up, not just do what you're asked, but sometimes do what you deem necessary. And it's clear that there were times where Derek deemed it necessary to commit the foul against the other guy, maybe slow the ball down, get a stoppage of play for whatever reason. In 258 games, 645 steals. 645 fouls. He was not afraid to have the whistle blown against him, and I'm sure it benefited his team in the times it was needed. If it didn't, I don't think he'd have 5 rings, right? Now, percentage-wise in the playoffs, again, these gentlemen just showed up. Gilbert Arenas shot in the playoffs for 31 games, 41% from the field, 31% from the three-point line, and 77% from the free throw line. Get the ball, do what you need to do. Now, let's talk about that 77% from the free throw line. We all remember the LeBron moment. That says what you need to know about why his playoff free throw percentage is lower than his season free throw percentage. I wouldn't say he choked, but like I say, every time I bring up any type of playoffs, that's when the big boys come to play. And sometimes, even when you are one of the big boys, the bigger boy in the room or the bigger competitor sometimes wins you out. And energy is real, I believe. I think that's what happened, and that's why Gilbert is negative 3% on his free throw percentage. But let's look at Derek Fisher. Playoff percentages. Derek Fisher has 42% from the field goal for his playoff. 258 games, 42% from the field. 40% from the three-point line. 40% from the three-point line for 258 games. Now, again, Derek Fisher wasn't the number one scorer, so you're probably thinking like, oh, well, he didn't shoot that many, but he made the ones he shot at a high rate, 40%. 81% from the free throw line, which meant this was not a guy that you wanted to send to the line simply because he was coming away with points. Now, some people would say, oh, 81, now he's going to miss some. 81% is incredible. Now, of course, there are guys who are in the 92 percentile. You know, there are guys who are shooting, I want to say 93 or 94% career is one of the highest, and I think that's around Steve Nash. But 81% in the playoffs over 258 games, when you're not even the main guy that's ball handling and somehow you still end up on the line. Listen, as long as you do your job, you own your career. As long as you show up and you do what is required to put your name in a good place, what is required to have people remember, hey, this is how he showed up, you're fine. You're doing what's necessary. Now, when we get through all these numbers and you look at Derek Fisher's 258 playoff games, you look at Derek Fisher's 1,287 total games, but then you go over to Gilbert and you look at the fact that he made only 2 more shots, 3,722 shots versus Derek's 3,720 shots. When you look at Gilbert's 3 All-Stars and 3 All-NBA votes, and then you take those and his 60 points against Kobe Bryant, which is incredible, right? You take that and you compare it to Derek's incredible Iron Man-like consummate professional example, one of the best examples of how you show up as a professional athlete. You compare these two guys and you think to yourself, if Gilbert had 18 years, it would have been crazy. But if Fish didn't have 18 years, what would his career really have looked like? Because I say if Fish cut it down to 16 years, he still has the same career. Incredible, right? But if you cut him at 11 years, I think at 11 years, he only ends up with 4 rings, not 5. I think at 11 years, he for sure doesn't have 1,287 games. I think at 11 years, he, of course, doesn't have 16 playoff appearances. So it's what you do when you come to work that makes who you are. I'm not talking about these guys because they just are names that I remember from my childhood and I watched them play. No. These guys showed up. When I saw these guys on the court, I knew I was getting a ball game. When I saw these gentlemen on the court, I knew I was getting an example layered in front of me, whether it was an example of how to be a great role guy, or whether I was getting the example of how to be the underdog star. They showed up. They owned their careers. And the only thing the numbers really had to say to me when it came to these two guys was do them justice. These are two guys who were both kind of looked down on in a sense, Fish, because he was always with Kobe. Kind of like the whole Pippen thing. It's like, was he really as good as people think he was? He was there. The job got done. Yes. All 5. Fish was right there. With Gilbert, a lot of people didn't like his antics. A lot of people judge him because of that. If you ask me, again, I'm not the type to count someone's pockets, but I watched what he did a little bit after the NBA, and I see how much money he got out of his 11 seasons versus, say, a Derek Fisher with 5 rings in his 18 seasons. I see the difference in that. In the wage, they did what they were supposed to do. I think Fish should have had a little more coming to him on the financial scale from what I saw. However, I don't think he's complaining. I think Gilbert would give back some of that if he could get a ring, but I don't think he's complaining. And what I have to say, I have one issue with the numbers. As we had this discussion, the numbers and I, as a figurehead, I felt like sometimes the numbers don't jump out to others. Like they're not willing to have the discussion and tell other people, hey, this is what this is about. It's not about how you feel about it. It's about what was done, what was accomplished. If our emotions swayed not just the numbers, but the outcome of the numbers, then what's the work for? What's practice for? That's what those guys are out there doing. The repetition, the muscle memory, that's where our entertainment gets better because they put in the hard work. The least we can do is appreciate the numbers that came from that hard work. That was the discussion that I had, not just about these numbers, but in general with the numbers, for the numbers, when we talk about the numbers. So in conclusion, if you were to start a team today, I think everybody would take Gilbert first. But if Gilbert wasn't on the board and you saw Derek Fisher and you knew this was going to be this is a guy who's going to stay healthy, he's going to show up, he's going to do his job, he's going to make the guys around him better and make the stars comfortable, you wouldn't hesitate. And if you knew these would be the numbers, if you know those numbers were coming out of a guy for 18 years, I mean, 8.3 points looks incredibly low, but if you're getting that for 18 solid seasons out of a guy, let me explain to you what that's going to do for everyone around him. And again, this is a point guard who didn't have an extremely high assist total for his career, but he was playing behind the Kobe Bryant. Or excuse me, he's playing alongside the Kobe Bryant because they don't play the same position. So he wasn't playing behind him. But what this is saying to me, these numbers, they say that if you don't take the time to understand what your employee is capable of, and if they are not aware of what they are capable of, then none of this is possible. None of it. Doesn't happen. So again, if it's up to me and I'm starting today, if I have a choice between Gilbert and Derek, I'm taking Gilbert first. The numbers that he produced over 11 years are just astronomical in a sense. It makes you really wonder, did he ever hit his prime? But with the numbers that Fish gave, oh, you will be excited to have him. It's no question. Take the time. I appreciate your time. But please take the time to visit thinkering.space. Subscribe to our YouTube at Thinkering Talks. Visit our Instagram, all in our Facebooks, all of the links to every social site, to every streaming site. They are all on thinkering.space. Visit teespring.com/thinkering shop to purchase some t-shirts, some mugs. You can also purchase mugs and t-shirts on thinkering.space as well. We are doing our best to not just have a little bit of merchandise for you guys, but to have a variety. Really appreciate everyone who tuned in this evening. And most importantly, I appreciate those who are consistent with their own love. Love yourself, love those around you. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Have a good one.